Hi everyone and welcome back to another video for Phantasy Star Online 2 New Genesis. In today's video I'm going to be covering something that's came up a bit recently. So in one of the recent updates for the game, to launch the version 2 of the game, one thing that Sega have added is a thing called the creative space, which is essentially an area in the game where you can build more or less anything you want to. The problem with it is that it is quite unintuitive to use, and the tutorials that Sega provide are not really that good, so they only really teach you the absolute basics of it. So what I'm going to do today is just do a couple of little guides really for the creative space on how to use it, how to make it a bit easier to work with. Just start with the super basics first, so actually accessing the creative space first of all. So the creative space is accessed by the Ryuka, so you can see it just here. You can also access it through your quick menu as well. So just there. You won't actually be able to access the creator space until you've spoken to an NPC called Arks, which is this girl over here. So once you've spoken to her, she'll give you some different tutorials to do. She basically teaches you the absolute basics of the creative space, but I do mean the basics. It's literally things like how to place an item, how to remove an item. There's not a lot she actually teaches you. Once you've done all of her tutorials, then it'll just more or less let you free in the creative space. But there's a lot more you can do with the creative space that the game doesn't tell you how to do. So let's go to the creative space first of all. But yeah, I'm making this video because I had a problem with trying to find out how to do a few things in the creative space, and I couldn't find really many videos dealing with it because it's just released. So this is the creative space, and this is more or less what you'll load into when you first load the creative space. So this is your kind of your default space. So you'll have a little house already built for you, a teleporter which takes you back to the actual ships for PSO2. And the only extra thing I've got here is this little block, which I'll actually just delete now. So this is exactly as it'll appear when you load in. So Ash will teach you about a few things, such as the GP tree. So this GP tree, you want to interact with this every day. And what this will do is it will give you a thing called Genesis points, which are what you use to buy various different furnishings and building materials. And the way that works is the building materials that you actually buy what are called blueprints. So once you've unlocked the blueprint for something, you can build as many of it as you want to. So first thing I want to cover is, so I've mentioned about the issues with the lack of tutorials. One thing that I've seen a lot of people struggling with is accurately placing things. So there is one thing that can help with that, but there is also a problem with the creative space. So when you go into edit mode, which I'm not going to cover because this is covered by the NPCs. So say for example I want to place this foundation block. You can see here that we've got this grid on the ground, and as I move it around you can see that it kind of snaps to different squares on the grid. The problem that I've seen some people having is that they may not want to place it directly on one of these squares. So say for example, say if I put that box there, that foundation, and then I want to put a box a little bit offset from it, but not where one of the grid squares is. There is actually a way to do that the game doesn't tell you how to do. So what you do is you go into the build options. So the way you access this is while you're in build mode, if you hold left trigger and press Y, you'll go into the build options. In the build options, there's a few things you can tweak with here. So first of all, you can turn the overlay grid off completely if you want to. This is the important one though, snap to grid. So by default, it will be set to per block, which is how it is at the moment, where it will snap to each individual block on the grid. You can change that to per half block. So you can see now I've got a little bit more movement, a little bit more freedom with where to place it. It's now going every half block instead of every single block. You can also turn it off altogether, and this actually gives you completely free movement. So if you want to place something that isn't, you know, bound to the actual grid lines, then you can do it this way. So for example, I could put that box there, and you can see that's not actually connected to any of the grid lines. That's a really useful tool. That's the first thing. So snap to grid is really, really useful. for a lot of things. You know, if you want to build like a foundation for a house, it's really handy to have the snap to grid on because you want all of the walls and everything to line up perfectly. But occasionally you do want a bit more freedom with where to place things, and removing the snap to grid can help with that. So the next thing I want to briefly cover is about Arks Decoys. So if you've been to other creative spaces, you may have noticed that there are what essentially look like holograms of other people's characters. And I've seen a couple of people struggling with how to use those as well. So the Arks Decoy, again, while in edit mode, load your parts up, and somewhere in your parts list, there is this, which is the Arks Decoy. Now, there is a little limit with this. You can only place a maximum of 10 of these in your creative space. However, other people can place their characters as well. All you need to do for that, if you want to let other people put their characters in your world, is just give them editing rights in your world. You can then remove the editing rights once you've actually placed the decoys. So the way these work, so if I place an Arks Decoy, place it just as normal. Again, we can just turn the snap to grid back on. And it will again snap to each individual grid line. So if I place the decoy, what I've seen a few people struggling with is, once that decoy is placed, that's how it shows up, and a lot of people are not sure how to actually make it look like your character. So another thing to note as well is this little ring that goes around the decoy. The little terminal at the front, that signifies usually the front of the character. So if I move this character, so you can see that little sort of square part at the front of the circular ring, that shows the orientation of the character. So again, you can rotate it around as you can with anything else. But if I place that from out of edit mode, you can see it's just like a generic hologram. It doesn't actually look like your character. If I access it, nothing happens. What you need to do to get it to look like your character is go into edit mode, and while you're in edit mode, access it, which the access changes to edit. Go and edit, and then I can put in the name of my character, a little message that you want it to say. You can also choose how you want the message balloon to show up. So normally it's just a normal text bubble. Emphasis is the one that appears when you do like a shouting emote or something like that. The one that, well, I'll show you actually. So with emphasis, basically once you've done all this, all you need to do. So I'll put a message in, we'll put this on emphasis, and the manga expression is little symbols that can appear with the text bubble. So if I say idea, for example, and then press close, apply what you've done, and you can see now it copies the character that I'm on. And then if I then come out of edit mode and interact with her, you can see it shows the message, and emphasis is that bubble there. Again, if I go into edit mode again and press B to edit, so if I now change this to uncertain, and again change this to, for example, the irritated one, close that, come out of edit mode again, and access her, and that's the uncertain text bubble. It's exactly the same as the ones that you can use for cutting chats and things like that. But that's how the Arks Decoys work. Now, the limitation of the Arks Decoy is they will always appear as the character that you're currently on. You can have multiple different characters in your worlds. So the way you would need to do that is just have all of your different characters visit your creative space and drop Arks Decoys, and that's how you get different characters in. Also note that if you do edit any settings on an Arks Decoy, as soon as you confirm, it will confirm to the current character you're on. So if you want to change anything that's on an existing Arks Decoy of a different character, make sure you do it on that character, otherwise it will revert to the character that you're currently playing at the moment. The other thing to note about them is they don't really have any interactivity. They will look at you when you're close to them. You can see your head's moving there. The pose that they're in will depend on whatever your idle pose is. So if you change your idle pose beforehand, so for example, I change my idle pose to the floating with arms crossed one, for example. And go into edit mode again. Again, edit this. I think you might actually have to like change something. So if I do that, you then adjust set idle pause then to copy the one I'm using now. That's a little bit on how Arks Decoys work. Just another note as well about them, you can actually move Arks Decoys around your map and you won't lose the information. So if a friend drops one of their characters in your world, you can move them somewhere else. The only thing that will change it back to your character is if you edit any of the settings, such as the speech or anything like that. But you can move them freely. Just set my idle pause back. That's Arks Decoys. Just to show you, you can. If I do this, if I put a decoy down, and then edit it, just put some basic details in, have a copy of your character. Then what you can do is, if I select move and select it, I can move it over here, put it down, and it will retain the character, and it will do that for your friend's characters as well. So you can move an Arks Decoy of your friend's character without losing it. That's Arks Decoys. The next thing I want to cover is about switches, so and cubes. So this is one major frustration of mine with the creative space. The tutorials for the creative space do not cover anything about switches or teleporters or anything like that.
The live concert is on right now in Pretend City.
So start with these ones. So teleporters. Teleporters are really, really easy to set up. So all you need to do is you need to buy the intra-space teleporter. You buy that from, I believe it's the Genesis points part. It won't actually show up for me actually in the list now because I've already bought it, but you just need to spend some Genesis points to get the teleporter. It's the same for a lot of the parts. So what you want to do is in edit mode, just drop a teleporter down somewhere. And then just drop another one in a different area. They always work in series of 2. Well, usually. You can have a single teleporter that just goes one way, but you won't be able to get back. What you want is 2 teleporters that link. So once you've set them up, what you need to do then is go into your settings and just highlight one of the teleporters. When you highlight it, there's quite a few options for it. So the way that a lot of switches and teleporters and everything works in the creative space is by a system called Connect IDs. So if you think of a Connect ID as a unique identifier, that when that Connect ID is met, the game will perform a specific task. So it's split into Connect Send and Connect Receives. So what I'll do is I'll set these teleporters up to link together and show you how this actually works. So teleporters, it's a bit simpler. These actually use their own little system, but I will cover the Connect IDs straight away as soon as I've done this. So for teleporters, literally all you need to do with them is in the options, in the settings, there is a thing called link teleporter number. And you can set this up between 1 and 10, so you can have up to 20 teleporters. So it's essentially 10 pairs of teleporters you can have. So say if I set this to teleport number 4, for example. So if I come out of billboard now, if I try teleporting through this, it says teleporter with the same number not found, so it doesn't work. So then what you need to do is go to your other teleporter, go into edit mode, go into your settings on this teleporter, and also set this one to number 4 as well. And then if I come out of edit mode, walk into this teleporter and hit B to teleport, it teleports me to the other one, and then this one will take me back over to this one. Didn't see. You can also adjust the orientation, and this little mark on the floor you might be able to see is the direction your character will face when they come out of the teleporter. So if I teleport over to this one, see I'm pointing forward where that mark is. And the same for this one. That's how teleporters work. They are really, really simple to set up. Switches are a little bit more complicated, but I will try and explain them now for you. So what I'll do is I'll set up a very, very basic switch system just so you can see how it works. So what I want to do is I'm going to put a laser fence up. Just another little note, actually, because I've rotated things, this is out of alignment. There is actually a thing that they don't tell you as well, which is if you hold left trigger while you've got a build item in place, and then press A while you've got rotation selected, it will automatically default the rotation. You can also do the same for the scale. So, for example, if I massively scale it up, and then just press A, it will reset it back to the normal size. So I'm going to put a laser fence over here because I don't want anyone in my house. If I come out of edit mode now, you can't walk through this laser fence now. Yeah, I know I could jump over it, but this is just an example. So you can't run through that. However, if I then add a switch, you can do it with floor switches as well, but I'll show you an access switch for this one. So I'll put a switch on here. And then what I want to do is, while you're in edit mode, you want to go to your settings. And basically, for this switch, I go into settings. What I want is, you can see we've got switch on and switch off for connect send. So what this means is that if I press this switch to switch it on, it will send a connect ID number depending on what I choose here. So if I choose number 5, for example, that means that whenever I switch this switch on, it will send ID number 5. And anything that has an option to carry out a task when it receives ID 5 will do that task. It's quite complicated to explain really, but it's probably best if I show you. So I've set that switch up there so that it will send connect ID 5. If I then go to laser fence and again go in the settings for this, I want to go on this. So when this receives a connect ID, I want it to disable the build part collision detection. And what that'll allow it to do is it'll allow me to walk through it. So I do that and set that to number 5. Okay, so then if I come out of edit mode, what should happen then is, so if I try getting through this now, you can see it's totally solid. Can't walk through it. But if I go to the switch and press it, it will now send connect ID number 5, and the fence will receive that ID number 5. And I've set it up wrong. So let's have a look and see what we've done that's wrong. Yeah, I think I must have set something wrong on the switch, I think. Yeah, that's why. Sorry, I haven't actually set it on the switch. That's fine. So what I'll do is, I'll turn the switch off first. This is a good example to show you how you can like troubleshoot things, I guess. So I want to go into the settings for this switch again. And I want to set this so that when the switch is turned on, I want it to transmit connect ID 5. Okay, so that now should work. Fingers crossed. So you can see the switch is off, the laser fence is up. Yep. If I press the switch, hopefully, yeah, I can now run through it. That's because this switch in the settings, you can see, so when I switch the switch on, it sends a connect ID of ID number 5. And this laser fence has a section for operation after receiving a connect. So after receiving connect ID number 5, it disables collision detection on the fence. I could also set it so that it will also hide the build part. Now let's add a bit more to it as well. So let's set it up so that when the switch is turned off, let's set that to ID number 6. So when the switch is turned off at ID 6, I want it to show the build part at ID 6. And I also want it to enable the collision detection again. So hopefully that will work. I think I've set that up right. So that won't do anything because I'm just resetting the switch. So when I press this switch, the laser fence should disappear and I should be able to run through that area. You can see that that's absolutely fine. And then if I go back to the switch, press it again, the laser fence should reappear and block me again. Yeah, so that's set up properly. So that's a basic overview of how Connect IDs work. If something doesn't work, just check in your settings like I did then. There's probably something you forgot to tick. That's a very, very basic overview of Connect IDs and setting up a basic switch system. So you can also add things called cubes. So cubes allow you to add different effects and things like that. Now, I'm not going to cover timer cubes for the simple reason is that I'm not 100% sure how they work yet. I'm still experimenting with those. They seem quite complicated to use. But I have figured out how to use text display and sound cubes. And what I'll do for this is I will show you how to set up a collision detection area or an action detection area. So let's just turn that laser fence off so I can get in the house. So what I want to set up is, so in this house, I want to set it up so that when I walk through the door, I want it to play a message and play a noise just when I walk through the door. So the way you do that, first thing you want to set up is what's called a collision detection area. So a collision detection area is, it will send a connect ID whenever something passes through that collision area. So if I put that there, and just go on the settings, so they're totally invisible and you can walk through them, no problem at all. So you can only see them when you're in edit mode. So if I go into the settings for this, you can see on here, got your basic settings, same as the switches. What I want this to do is, so when someone makes contact with this area, I want it to send a connect ID of ID number, let's say ID 7. That's all I need to do for that one there. It's a make contact, sends connect ID 7. Then what we want to do is, if we make text display cube, put that in. Now, for some reason, these do show as visible. So what you need to do for these then is go into the settings for it. And you want to go on show build part, hide. And you also want to turn off collision detection for these as well, because otherwise you won't be able to walk through them. Because you don't want to be able to see them when you're not in build mode. So for this, what I want to do, what this text display cube will do is, whenever it receives a connect ID, it will play a message on the screen. So what you want to do is, after receiving a connect, you want to play text display at ID 7. So that means that whenever someone walks through this collision detection area, this cube will play a message. And you can also choose the display here. So unfortunately, it is only fixed messages that you can display. So you can have to say goal, clear, game over, success, failure, start, or time's up. Let's have it say success. So now, I come out of edit mode. When I walk through this door, it should say success on the screen. There you go. So that's how the text display cubes work, and it should do the same when I walk back through. So next up, if we go back into edit mode, we're now going to put a sound cube down. And what I'll do is I'll do this with a separate area. You can link multiple things to the same Connect ID as well. So for example, this sound cube, if I put this down here, and again, just go into the settings for it, hide it, and turn off the collision detection. So I want it to, when it receives the Connect ID, play sound effect at ID number 7. So all 3 of these items are on the same Connect ID. And I want it to play sound effect of correct. Again, come out of the ID. So now it should do exactly the same again, but it should also play sound effect as well. There you go. So the little like doo-doo noise, that was the sound cube. But next what I'll do is I'll show you how to use an action collision area or an action detection area. So what I'm going to do is I'll leave those cubes where they are for now. And what I will do is I'll create an action detection area and I'll put it over this Arks Decoy. I'll put it there. This is one of the frustrating things about Creative Space. It's really, really hard to tell about depth perception sometimes, isn't it? Let's just remove that quickly. So we've got a collision detection area, well, an action detection area around the Arks Decoy. So what I want to do now is you can't see it in edit mode, and again, you can walk through it, no problem at all. Go back into edit mode, and again, go into the settings for it. What I want this to do is, what action detection areas are, is they work similar to the collision detection areas, but the collision detection areas, they activate whenever you walk through them. The action detection areas only activate if you perform a specific action while you're in that area. So let's have it so that if I try attacking in that area, so whenever I attack in that area, I want it to send a Connect ID of, let's say, ID number 8.
Emergency announcement. We have confirmed the presence of powerful dolls in the vicinity of the aerial region. All
And then so I've set up, so it's Connect ID number 8 whenever you do an attack in that area. And let's also set up a text display cube. Again, hide it. When it receives a Connect, play text at ID number 8. So in other words, whenever an attack is performed in this area, it will send a Connect to this cube. And I want it to say failure. Next up, we're going to add a sound cube. And again, just edit it so that it doesn't show. And again, when this receives a Connect, I want it to play sound. Again, ID number 8, so it's all linked. And I want it to play the incorrect noise. You may or may not be able to hear this, so what I'll do is I'll set it as the incorrect noise first, and then I'll do the quest clear noise. So what should happen now is if I walk into this area, nothing happens. But if I try attacking near this Arks Decoy, I should get a message on screen and a noise. So I'll stop talking so hopefully you can hear the noise. So you might have heard it did like a sort of noise. Just in case you can't hear that, I'll change the noise. Do the quest clear noise. So again, do the same again. So that's the basic idea of how the cubes work. There are more cubes as well. So if I just come out of edit mode a second. In the build parts shop, there are more cubes as well. So there are things like where are they? So there's random cubes, which I think form a random action each time they're activated. There's things like delay cubes, which I think you use for things like time switches. I haven't experimented with those yet, so I may do a follow-up video on those. There's also things like combo cubes and count-up cubes as well, which again I haven't really experimented with yet. But basically, I just wanted to do a quick overview of how things like the switches work, because they're just not explained in the tutorial at all. You can see, so in this, we've set up a laser fence that stops you from getting in, that you can activate and deactivate. Set up a collision detection area. And we've also set up an action detection area as well. So I hope that's been relatively useful. I just wanted to do a quick overview of some of those useful tasks that you're going to need to use if you want to have any interactivity in your creative spaces. I do think it's a bit disappointing that Sega really didn't explain how to do the switches or anything like that. The tutorial for the creative space is really, really poor. So just to round out the video, I just want to cover a couple of improvements that I'd like to see to the creative space overall. So the number one for me is just making the actual placement of items easier, because at the moment it can be a nightmare placing some items. So if I place... One big example I've noticed is there's an item in one of the DLC packs called the Fancy Pool, and it's huge. You can't resize it. Trying to place this accurately is almost impossible. So I want to place this on the roof of that house. Because it's so big, it's actually hard to see where it is. And because of the depth perception, it's almost impossible to actually see. Now, you can actually fly in the creative space, which does help somewhat, but even then, you can see the items overlapping my character and making it very, very awkward to actually see where it's lined up. I mean, if I place it there... So there, I have actually managed to place it properly, but you can see like it's quite awkward to actually work with. Or if I want to sort of line these two pools up, for example, see, like trying to get it in the right space is really, really awkward. Particularly if you've got a lot of build parts, because the default is that things will snap to other build parts as well. You can turn that off, but it does just make things very, very awkward to actually place sometimes. So I'd like to see some improvements to that. The second thing I would like to see improvements to is probably the Arks Decoys. So at the moment there is a limit of 10 of them in a world, which I think is a little bit low for what they are. They are really, really, really basic NPCs. You know, they don't really do much of anything. It would also be nice to see them have a bit more interactivity, so have them respond to emotes or anything like that. I don't know if there is a way of doing that, but it does seem like they do just mimic your idle pose, and that's about it. I'd like to see that. What other improvements would I like to see? Honestly, I've mentioned it previously, but just a better tutorial system. The existing tutorials that Arks gives you, first of all, there's a bug with it, so a lot of them don't even show up properly. But even when you do get the full tutorials, it covers the absolute basics, and it doesn't even touch on things like switches, which are really, really important. One other thing I would like to see an improvement on is the terraforming. So if you don't know, in the creative space, you can actually terraform. So you can change the terrain height, so you can increase it to create mountains, or you can decrease it. And you can create like delves in the ground as well. You can also level the terrain as well, which is a fast way of flattening it back out again. So although that is really, really cool, there is a lot of limitations with it. So as an example, if I just dig into the ground a bit here. So let's say I want to make a cave, and I want to make it so there's like an opening in the wall here that I can get into. Can't do it, because there is no way to adjust the axis that you actually dig on. You can only dig directly down or directly up. You can't dig into the walls. So the only way of doing it at the moment is to basically dig into the walls excessively. And once you've made a cave, then you can kind of raise the terrain around it. It's really, really awkward to do though. It takes an absolute ton of time and it's just not very intuitive at all. So I would like to see some improvements on that, just to make the terraforming a bit more useful. It's really, really handy for digging, you know, for creating like underground areas and things like that. But I would like to see some improvement on that. The other thing is, it's just a really, really basic one, would just be just more build parts. I expect that obviously Sega are going to add more and more over time. You can see at the moment that essentially everything in the Genesis Point shop that isn't interactable like a cube, any actual build paths are all themed around Alio. So I'm assuming they're going to do Retem, Caveris, Steer at some point, but for now it is quite limited. There is a Star Gem shop as well. This is mainly things from original PSO2. There is a decent selection of stuff in there. One criticism I would have of this though is that although the prices don't look too bad at the moment, there is currently a 40% sale in this shop. They will be significantly more expensive when the sale ends, and I think that is too pricey for what it is. But other than that though, I think the creative space is actually a really cool addition to the game. It lets you play a completely different way, and I'm really, really happy that they've added it as well. Some of the creations that I've seen coming out of this have been ridiculous. I've seen people create the Battleship Yamato from PSO2 in like full scale. I've seen people create Kirby. I've seen full cities. It's insane the things that people are making already, even with how limited the system is in some aspects. But anyway, I hope this video was useful to you. If you've got any questions at all about Creative Space, just drop them in the comments. I will try and answer what I can. As I say, I'm still learning myself with this as well. There are still some items I'm not really sure how to use. I'm looking for other videos to try and figure out how to use those. But I just wanted to put this up just to try and help people who might be struggling with, especially with things like the switches and learning how the Connect IDs work. All you need to remember for those is that you're essentially having one item send a signal to another one, and the other item is receiving a signal and then activating a response based on the signal it receives. Any questions at all, or just leave them in the comments below and I will try and answer what I can. But in the meantime, thanks for watching and have fun in the creative space.